Okay. Hello, Dragon Ball Super family. I'm Legends Michael Kerrick, and I'm bringing you my deck list from this weekend's online Zenkai Cup hosted by Core TCG. I ended up placing top 32 with a pretty meager 4-3 finish. I lost against Beerus Ramp twice, which is a horrible matchup for this deck. And then I also lost versus Apeku, which is actually a pretty decent matchup for this deck, but I did not play that one too well. I did beat Vegito, which is an auto win for this deck, the set 2 Vegito, and I beat two SS4 decks, which are favorable for this deck. I think I'm missing someone in there, and I faced the mirror match, which was crazily shocking. But I'm going to talk about the deck because I'm super excited about this deck. As you know, I love blue-red decks, and there are some really cool new tools for Cooler. Uh, Quick caveat, this was a Zenkai Cup format, so there are cards in here I had to play for a Zenkai Cup to fit the 15 Zenkai series cards in the deck. I will go over them and what they should be instead. So, for those who don't know, the leader, both on the front side and the back side, when one of your opponent's battle cards has its power reduced, your opponent sends the top card of their deck to the graveyard. And then on your opponent's turn, the first time one of your opponent's battle cards' power is reduced by one of your battle card skills, you actually draw a card. On the backside, that upgrades to either player's turn when you reduce one of their cards by a battle card skill. And then on both sides, it maintains the simple when this card attacks, you draw a card. Sadly, he does have an Awaken at 4 life, which is untap 1, draw 1. Like I said, on the backside, the only thing that really changes about this leader is that, one, you can actually stop attacking leaders. I forgot to mention that. The front side, you must attack a leader to get the draw. On the back side, you can attack anywhere you want to get the draw. And then, of course, even if you reduce something's power on your turn, you still get the draw. So that's pretty cool. This is probably one of the only leaders in the game where you desperately want to awaken on your opponent's side, and I will go over how that combo works as I go through the deck. On your opponent's turn, sorry. So, I have nicknames for some of the cards we have in the deck. So to start off with, we have our energy cards. 4 copies of Mecha Freeze Energy Bite and 4 copies of Cooler Calculating Warrior. So Cooler Calculating Warrior is one of those cards I played strictly because it was Zenkai format. I probably would play 2 or 0 copies of this card if it wasn't Zenkai format. It's a check land only if you have a Frieza clan on the field. Whereas this is always a check land because you're going to charge blue-red turn 1. And then the actual on-play auto effect of this thing never happens. You're never going to play this card. So it's actually a horrible card. Instead, I would play copies of Cooler Clan Avenger in the main deck. So that you have a chance to beat control decks like Beerus or Vegeta Ramp or Hatch. And they're just better turn 2 plays, like 2 mana plays, and this card will literally never be played. But in this format, it functions as a great check land, because sometimes it did come down as a check land, and most of the times I actually mulled for this card or this card, never together. Like, if I had both, I would keep this card and throw this card away, because I'm trying to charge this card, get it out of the game as fast as I can, and then maybe if I see these later, they're actually live. Whereas this card most of the time is just a detriment, it just becomes a 1 for 10k. Real quick, the deck is filled with 1 for 10Ks, but that's actually an advantage in this format with SS4 Gogeta running around. In case you miss on your responses to that card, you can actually pretty comfortably combo out of that card. Between a super combo and tapping energy, comboing a 1 for 10K and then just a 5K. So instead of giving up 5Ks to get out of that card, you can pretty easily give up a few cards and then just move on with your game. So these are energy cards for the deck. Nothing to be said about this. Then we talk about the arrivals, right? 1 copy of this 5-drop Cooler Suffocating Tyranny. He's actually a really cool card, but 3 energy for what he does. He only mills 2 if you play him on your opponent's turn for 3 energy, and it only mills 4 maybe if you play him on your turn. Like, in a perfect scenario, he's really good, but what he's really good for is sneaking in that extra mill, right? Because when he's played, he mills 1 anyway, and then when he swings, he mills again, like his auto triggers again, and then, of course, he has an auto, at the end of your turn, you can bounce him back to your hand to untap an energy, which is what you'll do every time. You're never going to leave this card on the field. There are games where I actually cast this for 5 mana and then just swing and then get the mills off, the play mill and the swing mill off, and then bounce it to my hand. And then if you do hit a battle card, you get a 3rd mill or a 4th mill even. So it's in those scenarios, it's cool. He does dome SCRs, which is cool because he negs by 25k. But in all honesty, you never want to see more than 1 copy of this card because you're never going to resolve multiple copies of this card, right? Like, if you see this card, that's great, and with more searchability in this deck, you're going to see this card. But if you see 2 cards of this, that's just as dead as this check land that we're trying not to play. So that's why we play 1 copy of this card. This Arrival Suite is still the same. 4 of the Cooler and 4 of the Majin Buu, the life and blood of this deck. Oftentimes, you do want to resolve the Majin Buu because it is a draw too if it's the first time you've milled your opponent this turn. And then whereas the cooler is just a draw one, but does mill an extra card on its own, which is important. Obviously, the coolers being able to mill like 12 or 3 each up to 12 is really important. And then you get to play the boos. Remember to pick up your coolers, right? Like at the end of the turn. Obviously, there are select scenarios where you'll keep your cooler on the field, like you get to dome a unison with it next turn because unisons are threatening to you. But most of the time, you're going to want to pick up your coolers and keep them in your hand because they are the most powerful tool in your deck. I'm going to shuffle these boos away later. And we'll actually use them to talk about some combos as we go. And then for our last arrival target, and actually the start of what I call enablers in this deck, we have this Chilled Ruling Through Fear. So this is probably the best piece of support they could have ever given the deck. It's got dual attack, which is sometimes relevant because it lets you check unisons. And then it's got blocker, which is super relevant because it lets you block leaders and unisons, which once again are the threats of this deck. It's a rival for 1 red and 1 blue, so pretty costly, but if you do get the chance to arrive it, it actually is super worth it. Then it has this permanent where if you have a red-blue multicolor card in your energy, it becomes a 0 for 5k red-blue combo card. So that allows us to enable our rival plays, which is why I call these enablers, right? We play a total of 9 enablers. That's kind of what the deck was missing. Back in the day, I used to force Rival Seeker into the deck to get more enablers to play the deck. Now we have this. It lets us cut a huge part of the engine out. Although there is a version of the deck I will test with 4 Rival Seekers, 4 Gohans as well. Because it's still like, there's still targets for the deck to hit. But that's down the line. And then it has this on-play auto. When this card is played, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck and add any red or blue Frieza clan to them. That is the biggest boon I've ever heard. So this card comes into play, right? It negs something, which will then draw your card off your leader effect. But then it searches your top 5 for any Frieza clan. That's like so cool to me, right? Well, 5 or less. So like that's every Frieza clan in your deck. That's these 5 coolers that you see here. That's all these check lands you see here. That's more copies of himself that you see here. That's Frieza's Death's Embrace. Like there's so many targets for this card. So if you do arrive it, it's actually super worth. You got to see him as both an enabler and an arrival piece. And then of course if you can return him with your to your hand with Boo, like this is by far the best card to return. Like this sometimes is good, but this is easily the best since it fits both scenarios easily. And of course it's always a 0 for 5k in your hand, so that's really big. And of course, the second part of the auto, you get to target one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and reduce its power by 15k. So this gave the deck another 4 cards that ignore barrier to mill, which was like one of the deck's weaknesses. If your opponent put up too many barrier threats, like you couldn't get through them because you can only mill with your 4 coolers, now you have 8 cards that clear barrier card. And 15k off a barrier card is big. This is why Vegito just can't beat this deck. Like no matter what Vegito they put up, it's dying, and they're milling a bunch of cards for it, right? So super dope. And then for our other enablers, we have, of course, the 4 Beerus, Divine Obliterator, super combos. Like, this deck lives and dies off of how many of these you see. That used to be the only case for this deck. Now you have extra enablers, so that's less true. But this is a way to tap out and still continue your plays. You want to use your other enablers before you use your Beeruses. That way you can tap out and bait your opponent into thinking you don't have Beeruses. And, of course, our last enablers are SCR, the Radiant Sands. This SCR actually doesn't really do much as an SCR itself. What it does do is offer us another like red-blue zero-cost combo. Once again, enabling our rival plays. Most of the time, I just use it for that, and I just Z it away so it doesn't just disappear. Versus the SS4 Gogeta matchup, however, since they can just play Unison, Leader, and A-Drop Gogeta, if you open this early, it's actually super worth to cast this into SS4, and then just start slamming them with only this for double strike crits, and then spending your leader attack and all your attacks elsewhere. They have to answer this card eventually. Their SCR doesn't, or sorry, their 8-drop Gogeta doesn't even clear this card, so it becomes a huge threat in that matchup. Now that we've talked about our enablers and our rivals, let's talk about how we abuse this leader's awakening, right? We talked about how we want to awaken on our opponent's turn. So why is that? So the frontside auto, when your opponent like mills a card, or when one of your opponent's battle cards gets their power reduced by one of your battle cards, you draw, right? That only happens on your opponent's turn on this leader. So you want to get as much value out of that effect as you possibly can. I usually, as a habit, try not to even arrival anything until I can awaken. So I'll just take the first 4 damage, or if it's simple combo stuff, I can get up a 5k to buy more turns. But like my first arrival play will happen the moment I am able to awaken. So usually at 4 or 3 life, depending what my opponent set me to. So here's how you'll do it. You'll let's say we have an energy up, right, or energy down. So you'll Beerus to stand up the energy, right? You'll rival some card, let's say it's like Cooler or something, right? You'll mill your opponent's battle cards. You'll draw one off your leader, which is super dope. Then you'll awaken, so you tap the energy, right? So you draw your card. You awaken, you draw another card for awakening. Then since you still have this in your combo area, you just rival the second card off the mana you got from Awakening. And since they probably still have a battle card, since it's only 10k, like you rival the second card off the same energy and the same Beerus, so you get to draw another card and then maybe another card off your boost. So you drew 4 cards on your opponent's turn, 3 or 4 cards on your opponent's turn on arrival. Whereas if you just choose a rival on your turn, you're giving up this auto, and that really doesn't do much for you. Like being on this side doesn't really do anything for you unless you're trying to reduce your opponent's battle cards on your turn, and most of the time that's like never really the best play. So that's definitely one of the like tricks of the deck that I urge you to get used to. I know Awakening on your opponent's turn seems really weird, but it's actually advantageous for this deck to do so. Also, this Frieza or this Chilled card was the other 4 copies of the Zenkai cards I need in the deck to meet the requirements for this format. It is whatever. We play a full suite of Frieza's Death's Embrace, not because the card's great, but because it's a Frieza clan, so it can be searched by this Chilled card. It also is a mono red charge in case you don't have a check land to charge. That's like a big deal. Sometimes you just don't have a check land, but most of the time your energy is like 5 or 6 check lands out of like the 6 or 7 energy you have. It's pretty crazy. It's got this cool activate battle function that's not once per turn, so if you do stick this card, your opponent can't attack you in anything that does not have barrier, which is really good because then you can just pay energy instead of spending cards out of your hand, and you can just neg their card and still draw and get your mills off. So that's really cool. It almost never sticks around in this format, but even if you're in a format where it doesn't stick around, like it's still good to play because one, it cantrips your leader, and you do need 5Ks in the drop for your Vegeta card. But it's also just a 0 for 5K to combo, which this deck is begging for, since every card I've shown you so far has been like a 1 for 10. Unless it has some stipulation that makes it a 0 for 10 or 0 for 5, right? So it's really good. Yeah, there's not much more to say about this. It's a really cool cantrip to play. Otherwise, it's most of the time it's just found in your energy. For draw apes. So I was talking a little bit ago about how like it's so difficult to find 0 for 5Ks to play in this deck that are efficient, right? Because all your 0 for 5Ks, you're kind of just like more combo pieces to mill out your opponent. However, like ape is like the perfect 0 for 5K to throw at your opponent when they like try to punch over your 20k leader, if they try to punch you with a 15k on 15k leader. You can just combo out the ape, and then you can Z it, and then when you use it for your Z plays later, then you can use it to draw 2, or you can just use it to draw 2, like if you go straight to the drop. The point is, on your turn, you really don't have much to do. It's either ape or Z play. So the ape is actually just a really good free 5k to play in the deck, literally to be used as combo power. It functions as a negate that you can use in the combo step. Also, like, on the off chance that once again the 8-drop Gogeta comes down and you just don't have a way to answer it, just having extra combo power in your hand is great. Drawing with the ape gets you that extra combo power. Remember, your Beerus super combo works under that Gogeta, so it lets you untap the energy, so whatever you drew, you can use that to untap and then combo another 10k. And then I mean, I should have brought this up during the enablers, but Senzu Bean's, of course, another enabler. This is probably the only deck that, like, Senzu Bean didn't really affect with its nerf. Of course, it does limit your arrival plays on your own turn, like, say you're going for a big arrival line to end the game. But, like, you're generally wanting to use Senzu Bean on your opponent's turn anyways, right? Like, it lets you tap out, and then you can Beerus to untap one, then you can Senzu Bean to get the second energy, then do a bunch of arrival junk, and your leader sits at a healthy 20k, right, to get out of attacks. And then after that, you can use apes to get your leader to 25k, which is, like, a comfortable combo number. So the 4 Senzu Bean's like an auto mess in this deck. For the negates, we play 4 copies of Testing the Opposition. It's like a no-brainer in this deck. It's a mono red charge, which is a big deal. It lets you go from 5 to 4 life instead of your opponent double striking you for free, which is a big deal. But also it lets you generate blockers. Like, why does that matter? So, like, let's say if you're playing in a best of 3 tournament, you will be playing unisons in a best of 3 version of the deck. Right now, I don't play any unisons because I want my opponent's leaders to attack me. But if you do play unisons, it lets you play this blocker, then you can block, and now it opens up a combo step so you can go into your rival plays. I play 3 copies of Master Roshi, Universe 7, United. Same deal, it's just a hard negate. Leaders and unisons dome you really hard since you can't interact with them. But Master Roshi is there so you can negate either one of them, whichever is more threatening. And then it can be comboed off, and it's a blue combo, right? So it combos with your Frieza's Death's Embrace to make a blue-red enable play, which is pretty cool. It being able to be comboed is also super relevant, once again, because of 8-drop Gogeta. It gives you more cards to combo out of this attacks. And also being a 0 for 5k, once again, when your leader's bean and you're just defending while you're tapped out, you have 5ks to give up to try to get out of attacks. Because we're in this current format that we're in, we played 4 Dirty Bursts just to snub out the 8-drop Gogeta. It makes it so you always have a Dirty Burst. All your energy, like I said earlier, is going to be blue-red energy, so you're always going to have 2 blue-red or 2 blue-up to be able to cast Dirty Burst for the counterplay effect. And then when they play the Gogeta, they just pass their turn, right? Like they drew a card, which is what you wanted them to do, and then they just pass their turn. And you'll never attack leader. Like, you're never threatening to kill life unless you've just been critting them all game. So they probably never get to Z Awaken. And even if they do Z Awaken, like, you just draw Ape and you have a bunch of 10Ks in your hand that you can just combo out of their stuff with. It's super easy. Also, it's another hard negate to use on leaders and unisons in the matchups where it's not great. And then, of course, one copy of Jiren Survival of the Fittest, because versus blue decks, you really just lose to Android 17 in multiple ways. One, it shuffles your hand back, so you can't defend since all of your defense comes from your hand. And two, like sorry. One, it shuffles your hand back, and it shuffles their hand back into their deck. So like they like gain 10 more cards in their deck, which is harder to mill, of course. So like at least you get to keep your hand, and then like the parity of the game is over. At that point, you outroll them. You can actually just combat them to death with your billion 20k double strikers at that point. But blue is definitely a very difficult matchup for this deck, especially because Boo Unison just cucks your plays too hard. So you kind of have to sit there and bait them into this card. Of course, that doesn't work on Beerus because they just wait till 16 and tap. They don't have to actually beat you at the game, so that's kind of tough. So that's the main deck. I definitely would have fit some Cooler Clan Avengers if I were playing in a best of 3 tournament, and I would have cut this card because Cooler Clan Avengers is infinitely better. There's no need for an overrealm. This deck does nothing with an overrealm. Like, yeah, none of that. Maybe like a draw 2, discard 1 overrealm is like the best thing I think of. Maybe to get some 10Ks out of your deck, out of your hand, but like it does nothing with it. And then finally we'll go over the Z deck. This card comes up all the time. And not to self-awaken yourself. Once again, you're not trying to awaken yourself. Every life your opponent deals to you, that's buying you an extra attack, right? So you don't want to actually take your own life. That's not what this is for. This is so you can shuffle away a dead card in your hand for 1 energy and draw a card. It's like if you don't have access to Ape or Frieza's Death Embrace and you just need to draw a card, this is a good way to just draw a card out of your Z deck. This card never came up. We do have enough blue energy to use it, but in the one matchup I would have used it on, all of my opponent's battle cards had barriers, so this card would have done nothing. And then like the only Z card that matters in this deck. This card pretty much reads 2 drop, 2 energy, draw a card, mill one of your opponent's cards, right? Like you don't have to spend a card to develop this card from your hand, which is really cool. So then it attacks, it negs one of your opponent's battle cards, so you get to mill them a card. And if you're ready on your backside, you also get to draw a card. You almost never get the second attack off from this card, but this is such a good way to go just +1 in card economy, right? And you don't care for the damage. Like you're using this to dome unisons, maybe clears a barrier type battle card. Like that's what we're really using this for. So this was a really cool like hidden buff to Cooler that people didn't think about. And that's the entire like deck. Obviously, there's no side deck for this because we're playing in a Zenkai format. Deck is super fun to play. I probably, it depends on how good blue is, whether you want to play this deck or not. It's very good into decks that go wide or like have to generate battle cards. But if decks have like a unison threat, this deck becomes a lot worse, right? So like, luckily most of the red decks in today's format do not have a good, oh my gosh, do not have a good unison threat. So, like Sin Shenron and SS4 Gogeta just do not have consistent unison threats. So those are, and Vegito, they don't have good consistent unison threats. At least unisons that you can't just kill, right? Like they obviously, some of them play like the Gogeta Powers Connection, but like once they play that card, you can like just start slamming at it with your leader. Since it's a 15k, you can swing double strikes into it. Like they can't defend it because they don't have, like, you're never gonna put their life at like 5, right? So they're never gonna get to testing you unless they take their own life. In which case, like you're still burning through their resources just to check a unison, which is like plus for you. So the deck's super fun to play. It's definitely a different version of Dragon Ball when you're playing this deck. So if you want to try it, I've definitely put some time into it. Don't get too disheartened, especially if you're playing against blue players, and limit test yourself to how much you can take before you have to arrival in this deck. A lot of it's just baiting your opponent into making plays before you start arriving. So that's pretty cool. As usual, a couple shoutouts. Shout out to everybody that was with me in the stream today. It was super fun watching or competing in this tournament and then hanging out with y'all in between rounds. Shout out to my Fort Walton Beach crew for testing with me and putting up with my like goofy shit that I make like Cooler. And then shout out to like all my friends down south in Miami. Shout out to Team Foe and PPG for creating such a cool environment to play in. Catch you guys next time.